Not for me. I just had a few announcements before we get Leslie up here. First, most importantly, if you are purchasing beverages of the adult variety, we'd prefer if you bought them from the bars that are up here on this floor, because the more revenue we have coming into those bars increases the amount of time we can get on the open bar tonight. So if you guys do need a drink, make sure you do it up here and not the downstairs bars, because that'll make tonight a lot more fun, and that's by far the most important part. The evening events tonight is going to be a performance by YT Cracker starting 8 o'clock. And then once he's done, we're going to have Rance DJing the rest of the night. So that's looking to be really great. And also, every speaker that's here has 2 red tickets that can be redeemed for swag up at the registration desk. How you get those tickets from them is totally up to the speaker. So Leslie's pretending like she doesn't know.
I don't have
But
any.
I assure you she does know.
I'll write you an IOU. I don't know if that'll count, though.
All right, so let's bring Leslie on up here. Talk to you guys about the 10 Commandments of Incident Response.
Hello, everybody. So I apologize. I'm not going to be quite as animated as I normally am because I was in the 3rd round fighting a guy yesterday and I broke my toe. So it's been a fun day. So we are going to talk about incident response today. So if you are an incident responder, if you are considering getting into incident response, if you're interested in incident response, or if you manage incident responders, this might be the talk for you. If not, I recommend the Ram. Fantastic beer. So who the hell am I? I'm Lesley Carhart. I am the incident response team lead at Motorola Solutions, and I'm a forensics person by trade. I also write all the security content on the Motorola Solutions website. I do a lot of other crap too. I couldn't give up the Air Force. I'm a reservist, I'm a marksman, and I'm a martial artist. So what are we going to talk about today? We're not going to talk about methodology because lots of talks in incident response cover what steps we do in the process of incident response. What we're going to talk about today is 10 rules of thumb for not burning out in incident response. And that means dealing with bureaucracy, dealing with human beings, dealing with all the problems that entails when we're working in incident response. Because in other roles in security, we can be kind of isolated in pen testing, forensics, etc. Once we get into incident response and incident handling, we have to interface with a lot of different people all the time. So, we're not going to talk about the methodology, but we do need to understand at the very basic level what incident response is. And I don't like reading big, long paragraphs of slides at people, but the things that we want to get off of this is that we are handling a security incident in a way that reduces recovery time and costs. Remember those 2 things because we're going to keep coming back to them through this whole talk. Time and money. We also need to understand that there's a difference between incident response and incident handling. They're not the same thing. We often use those terms interchangeably, but they're actually 2 different job roles, and for many reasons I'm going to talk about during this talk, it's a good idea for a workplace to have both. So the incident responder, the traditional incident responder, is doing the investigation. They are managing the technical element of doing a security investigation, investigating a breach, etc. Now your incident handler is doing a little bit different thing. They are interfacing with the humans. They're writing reports. They are talking to management. They're dealing with the panicking, freaking out people during a security incident. So why do we need to talk about this today? Well, again, like I said, there's a lot of material about how to handle a digital security incident out there, step by step. However, if you look at other jobs out there, other groups of people that do incident response, and it's not a term that's unique to us. You can talk about firefighters, you can talk about military, police. All these people do incident response, and they have lots of tools to deal with the high-pressure environment of dealing with some kind of incident. We don't have those things in security incident response. That's not something we're teaching in our programs to our new incident responders, to our people studying security in school. We're not telling them how to deal with the pressures, with the humans, with the report writing. And I think that we are failing our next generation of incident responders by not providing this. So I'm going to try and Feel free to ask me for these slides afterwards and give your own examples too. I'm going to leave lots of time for stories at the end. I want to help people not burn out in this field because something I keep seeing, I train a lot of security people, is people who burn out immediately after starting an incident response role. A month, 2 months in, they just can't take it anymore, and they think it's stupid, and they think it's not the job they should have taken, but they just don't know how to cope with it. So some brief disclaimers. Every organization defines every job role differently, obviously, so different tasks are going to be required in different incident response roles and incident handling roles. So I'm speaking from my experience and that of my colleagues and my friends. So you can tell me I'm wrong at the end of this, and it's fine, but I think this is going to help anybody who's dealing with business and dealing with humans in security. So I'm going to start with the most contentious of my rules, the one that pisses everybody off, and this is the one I got in a big fight with Harlan Carvey over too. Nobody gives an SSH about your exploit. Nobody gives us something about your exploit. And that's not only exploits. That's you just did something really cool in your incident response. You just found something neat in an investigation. You just proposed an idea that you think will really help your organization, and your management went, "It's nice, Leslie. Have your review done by the end of the week?" Yeah, unless you work for some security company that's all they do, and maybe not even then. And I know that's horrible. I'm a monster. So sorry. So I'm going to start with the worst one. So what does that mean to us? Does that mean we just give up because our management said, I don't really care about this thing you're proposing or this thing you did? No, we don't go to the bar and get angry and start drinking after that. What we do is we learn how to sell things to our organization. So how do we do that? How do we sell things? How do we propose things to our organization in a way that interests them? Well, first of all, we need to understand what organizations, what corporations and government agencies are interested in. And it really boils down to something very basic. They care about money lost, money they're gaining. In the right industries, I bet you can think of a few, life and death and catching bad guys, but mostly it boils down to money. Like I said, we were going to keep coming back to the money thing. So when we're proposing things and we want to reflect the amount of money that we are saving, we quantify. And quantify simply means we use numbers. So how much money could this awesome thing that I just designed save my company? How much could it avoid the loss of? In the right industries, how many airplanes will that get in the air? So that means a request and accomplishment, etc., and then a quantifiable outcome. And this should be really familiar because it's exactly the same way you should be writing your resume bullets. This is the same way you should be writing military award bullets, your annual reviews at your work. Everything should be proposed in this way to a large organization. You always want to have numbers. So the second commandment is much less contentious, and that is build good relationships. And this goes for any security industry when you're dealing with human beings. You are going to deal with the same people. We're a small community. You're going to be dealing with the same teams inside your organization over and over and over again. You're going to be dealing with legal. You're going to be dealing with HR. You're going to be dealing with your developers, with your IT. So the most important thing I can advise you is don't burn bridges. It's really tempting. We get very frustrated as security people because we know more about security than everybody else, so we're obviously awesome or something. Yeah, so we talked to our IT guy at 2 in the morning, and he's like, no, I can't shut down this server because you're going to shut down all engineering production. And we're like, no, you don't understand. You're compromised. You got to shut it down. And they're like, nah. So that's the point where we often want to start swearing at them or yelling at them, or simply get them in trouble with management. But we want to be really careful doing that because that same IT guy who we talk to at 2 in the morning and we avoid yelling at, and we take a deep breath and we don't burn that bridge, it's going to be the same guy we ask for a favor 3 months, 4 months, 5 months down the line in the next incident. And that also goes for dealing with the security community at large. You're doing a good job just by being here today. We want to always try to build good relationships inside the security community because we're going to need help eventually. None of us, raise your hand if you're an expert at everything. Okay, just making sure because I'd be really jealous. Nobody here is an expert at everything, and we all need help at some point, whether it's attribution of a malware sample or simply advice about a product. So this is a funny story why I came up with never be too sure about who's on the other end of the call. I actually had a colleague who was on the same incident call with a customer for week after week after week. It was the Monday call, they were always on it. And there was this other woman from the customer on the call with him. And young lady, younger than me, and every day he'd flirt with her. Every single call, he'd flirt with her. And one day, many months later, we Googled her because we were curious who she was, and she ended up being a C-level executive at that company. So it didn't work too well in his favor. Did not work too well in his favor. So never be too sure about who you're talking to. Never be too sure about how technical or non-technical they are. Don't make those assumptions until you know. Because they can always have more power in the organization you're talking to than you think they do. They might know somebody. And you also want to understand, we're dealing with a business. We want to understand the business goals and how the things that we're doing as security impact them. We want to understand if shutting down engineering is doable in our environment or not. If we can shut down the web servers. We need to understand that because we're part of a larger object. We're not just security. So the bottom line of all this is help other people, and they may help you in the future. And we want to build those good relationships and have them to protect us in the future. Commandment number 3, communication matters. So we are no longer a log analyst. We are no longer a pen tester. We are all of a sudden an incident responder, incident handler, dealing with management, dealing with furious executives. And they're not all technical. We're dealing with legal. We're dealing with HR. We have to deal with all of those people, and we have to make them understand us. And that doesn't just mean being able to explain technical concepts. That also means that we have to be able to write coherently. It means that we have to be able to speak, do reports, send emails. All of those things are very important. Not just because it'll help us at the time being, but also because those people will come back to the people they can understand with future questions, concerns, information, and with job offers. Commandment number 4 is assume nothing. And we already talked about some assumptions. And has anybody here worked help desk? Yeah, okay. So yes, you can plug an IDE cable in upside down. I've seen it. So anything is possible, even if you think it's not. And everybody can make mistakes. That means your manager. That means the technical expert who's sitting next to you, your malware analyst, your pen tester, your exploit development lead. All of them are capable of making mistakes. So when we're dealing with a high-pressure, high-risk incident, that quadruples in likelihood. So when we're dealing with an investigation and handling an incident beginning to end, we want to start from the beginning, and we want to use a scientific method, start from the beginning, and gather all the facts before we draw a conclusion. We never find facts to fit a conclusion we make beforehand. And we never make assumptions. If something doesn't sound right, we go back and we confirm that with the person who found it, or we do it ourselves. Now, we also don't want to, as I spoke about earlier, assume that people have a particular skill level or particular equipment available to them. And I learned that the hard way when I was a very young telecom tech. I was doing Cisco router repair for a company in Canada. And it's the dead of winter, and they're up in northern Canada in the Arctic Circle. And they have a router that's failed. So I dispatch a tech from the local company with the router. I FedEx it to him. He drives across the ice sheet. He goes to the town. He goes into the mine where the router is, plugs it in, calls me and says, so what do I hit to put the configuration on this? And I'm like, well, plug in your console cable. And there's this dead pause on the phone. You do know what a console cable is, right? And this is way back in the before time, before there was ports up on routers. There's no other way to get in the router. So long story short, I end up having to fly to Canada on a little turboprop plane, land on the sheet of ice, hitchhike with the Bell Canada guy with my router under my arm, go into the mine, and configure it, because I made the assumption that the network tech I dispatched would know what a console cable is, and that there would be one available if it wasn't. And there wasn't one available in that little mining town. So assumptions could be deadly in an incident, especially when we're dealing with remote locations, other countries, locations that don't have easy access to new equipment. Commandment number 5 is educate and document, and a lot of people say this should be number 1 commandment. It basically means when we are dealing with an incident, when we are preparing to deal with an incident, we write down everything. That doesn't mean have your pen and paper unless you want to. That means have a SharePoint, have a wiki, have that information available for you. Because again, we are going to be dealing with high stress, high pressure incidents in a time crunch. And we never want to try to figure out how to do a task that only one person knows how to do when they're out of office. We never want to try to figure out how to do a task again after we've done it once. And we certainly want to make sure we don't make the same mistakes as we did in the previous incidents. That also means, as far as training goes, we want to, of course, keep the training of our team current. But that's not adequate. Everybody wants to go to SANS class and stuff. You also need to be responsible for training your end users and getting their assistance. You need to ensure that your IT is properly trained to deal with security. And more importantly, again, I was talking previously about dealing with incidents as police, fire, military deal with incidents. Now, they do something differently than us. They drill tasks. They will do something like shooting a firearm. They will do that repeatedly, until they can draw from a holster and fire accurately without thinking about it. It's second nature. And we need to do the same thing with incident response. We need to drill our tasks repeatedly so that when it's a time crunch, when we're target and our credit cards have been lost and we don't know what to do, we do know what to do because we've done it 100 times before. We know what we do during a breach. We know who we notify. We know which processes we follow. Those are going to be your lifelines, education and documentation. When everything else fails, when it's the middle of the night and you get paged out and everybody is drunk out at the bar, you have those tools available. Commandment number 6 is one of my personal favorites, triage intelligently. And again, we're comparing this to other industries that do incident response, where triage is critical. And it's just as critical for us because I don't know does anybody else in this room do incident response currently? Okay, I'm sure you've all had days where you've had simultaneous incidents. You've had a server over here compromised, and you've got a malware outbreak over here, and you've got a screaming customer over here, and you've got to deal with all of those things. And that is triage. That is your hospital trying to figure out which patient to take first. And guess what? Those tools, they transfer over. So the first thing you do is you stop and you think about what you need to do next. We don't go aimlessly, blindly into the wall as we're dealing with the incidents. We stop and we say, 5 minutes, I'm going to figure out which tasks I need to do first. I don't care who's yelling at me. I need to do this in a sensible, logical way. And that's why we do these things like educate and document, because we have those tools available to help us when we're trying to decide. But if that's not adequate, if all the stuff we've drilled isn't adequate, we have other tools because all these other industries provide them. And there's endless tools for dealing with triage. My personal favorite, yes, I know I slept through the PMP at some point. So I promise this is going to be the last organizational thing I'm showing here, but this is a risk matrix, and it's just about the simplest triage tool you can possibly make. Basically, all we have on one side, we have a likelihood. On the other side, we have the severity if the bad thing happens, and this is measuring bad things. So we can take anything and put it on this scale. We can say, well, it's really, really unlikely that this bad thing is going to happen, but if it does happen, it's going to be absolutely catastrophic. So I still better look at this. So when I'm dealing with two pressing issues, I can stop and I can put them on the scale to the best of my knowledge. I can say, well, our web server is probably compromised, but it's this one little department and it really doesn't matter. It's not connected to the rest of our network, so that's only going to be medium. Well, we probably have there's a possibility that we have a malware outbreak in our sales department, and that would be pretty major if that occurred. So I'm going to deal with that first because that ends up being high, orange, high. It's very, very simple. I highly recommend it. But feel free to look at other triage tools that are available too, because we can use those. Commandment number 7 is the most basic rule of incident response, which is don't panic. But let's talk about panic for a minute. Let's talk about the two kinds of people who panic during a security incident. And I'm sure there's people out here who have run into these people. So the very first kind of person here you're going to deal with is the extremely technical person. This will be your malware analyst or your APT specialist who panics, who goes, oh my God, I've seen this indicator and it matches this thing I saw on this XYZ working group board. Oh my God, we're probably compromised by Bolivia. Yes, some country is attacking us. And that's the first kind of group you're going to deal with when you're dealing with a security incident as an incident responder, is those people on your own team who are going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, the sky is on fire. The second group is the non-technical people, and they have just seen something on CNN. They've gone, oh my God, the heartbleed virus, we're all going to die. Yes, yeah, a few of those. And that's your managers, your people who aren't really technical, but they're trying to be. So they're watching the news, they're reading the reports, they're going to conferences, and they're like, oh my God, are we victim to this? Did we get breached too? And you're probably not, but they panic. And you're dealing with those freakouts. Now, when somebody's freaking out, the first rule of thumb is peer review everything. We're going to go back to our scientific method here, our 5th grade science thing. Scientific method, peer review everything. Because all of those assumptions, as we mentioned earlier, are going to come back to bite us. When those people are panicking and telling you, oh my God, we're compromised by Bolivia, and you take that at face value, your investigation is going to go in an entirely different direction than it would if you said, okay, you saw indicator XYZ. Let's take a look at this in our logs and see if we can figure out why it could be a false positive. And panicked anything isn't good anything. And the unfortunate thing is that we, as incident responders and incident handlers, can fall into either of those categories because, again, we've established nobody in here is an expert at everything. So you could see something related to an engineering project on your network that you think is super serious, and you start panicking. And then the guy who's the expert on the engineering project comes in and says, oh, that's from 18 years ago, and we really don't care what happens to that. Oh boy, it got leaked. It was sold a decade ago. So this is a really good time. I talked about earlier the distinction between the two jobs, incident responder and incident handler, and I said that they're different. And that's important because the job of the incident handler is to take the heat off the incident responder. As the incident responder does the technical investigation and remediation, handles the incident. The incident handler is dealing with the panicking people. They are providing reports to the management people who want to call every 10 minutes about the disaster that's going on. They are the person who's writing the reports. They are the person who's keeping all the teams cohesive during the incident. So that's why it's really, really important in our line of work to have both of those jobs assigned to every incident. And they don't need to be a dedicated person. They just need to be assigned during the incident. Okay, you're going to deal with management. You're going to do the communication while I do the timelining, and I figure out what happened, and I start the process of remediation. And all of the things we've talked to up until this point help us deal with panic. Again, we have our lifelines. We have our drilling tasks repeatedly. We have our documentation. We have our education and training. All of All of those things are there to help us deal with other people's panic and our own panic. Okay, so this is kind of a weird one, and I will give a ticket to anybody who can tell me where that quote is from. Specialization is for insects. You got it, you got it. So why I say this is when we're working in security, we tend to specialize. We start out in the log analysis trenches, and then we move on. We go to forensics, we go to malware analysis, we go to pen testing, exploit research, et cetera, et cetera. But when we go back to being an incident responder, we're going back to being a jack of all trades. We have to have a little knowledge of all those things to properly handle a security incident. And that expertise we have is valuable. It's useful when we're dealing with an incident. However, we have to be a generalist when we're looking at the incident as a whole, because specialization in one of those fields is going to color our perception. What I mean by that is I sit next to a malware analyst switching to guns. Some of you know him. We sit next to each other. I'm the forensics person. He's the malware analyst. And when he looks at, we look at the same incident, he's going to see different things on a compromised system. He's going to see the malware binary and the C2 channels. I'm going to see the files modified, deleted, copied off the system. And both of us are going to be looking at two separate incidents when we're looking at the same machine, unless we both consider it from the perspective of a network log analyst, a malware analyst, a forensic analyst. That doesn't mean that we have to be experts at all those things. It just means that we have to have enough knowledge to be dangerous at all of them so that we can bring in the resources we need. And there's this quote, as he said, by Robert Heinlein. Again, I'm not going to read long paragraphs at you here, but it's all the things he thought a human being, a good human being, should be able to do instead of an insect who can only do one thing. And I wrote my own version that I'll show you on the next slide for an incident responder, which is all the things I think, and you might have more to add, and you can tell me so. All the things that I think a good incident responder should be able to do in the security realm. Some examples, I say you should be able to use the command line. You should be able to explain Black Tuesday patch notes. You should be able to make a forensic image. And you should be able to deal with a vice president who's angry at you. All of those things we should have some basic knowledge of, and we don't have to be specialists at them. We just have to know enough to know what we need to do next. Commandment number 9 is see the big picture. So we all know, security people, we know there's a lot of different types of security issues that we might have to respond to as an incident responder. We have our external attacks, our DDoSes, etc. We have our insider threats, people leaking stuff, our Edward Snowdens. We have our malware issues on any network, mass malware, crimeware, CryptoLocker, etc. And then we have our targeted attacks, our APT, yes, 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 okay. So all of those different types of security incidents have a different impact on each of our organizations. And that also varies by the location of the office we're dealing with and the department in the company that we're dealing with. And we need to have some basic understanding of that, because those cultural and legal and financial differences inside our organization are going to make a big difference in how we properly handle the incident. Not only does that mean different things will be targeted in our environment, it also means that the way we remediate them and the way we respond to them will be different. Because, for example, it's really hard to get forensic images out of certain countries. A good example is India. Most network connections that companies have to them are not the fastest from the US. But there's also big problems in shipping stuff out of India. Shipping computer equipment, things can get held up in customs for weeks if you try to ship any kind of hard drives, etc. So you as a good incident responder need to consider this when you're dealing with an incident in India. You need to say, okay, what's my bandwidth to India? How fast can I transfer this image? How long is it going to take across the wire? Versus, if I have Joe Schmo, network admin, go into the data center, pull the hard drive, put it in an envelope, and ship it to me, Could it get lost in customs? Does he have the experience to do that properly? If it gets through customs, how long will it be held up there as computer equipment? And that all matters to how we deal with an incident. And then also environmental differences, absolutely. Things like business environment, business climate, the speed of things. I don't know, do we have any telecom people here, network people? Anybody who's worked on telecom networks? So there's certain countries that respond differently when you're dealing with telecom stuff than others. There's certain countries that response time is iffy. You know, it can wait a few days. There's other countries where a circuit needs to be fixed in an hour. That matters to you. That's just the culture of their technology companies in that country. Some places it's much more important to get things done quickly. Other places things can wait a little while technologically. They're not as important to business. They're not as important to people. And that's all going to impact the way you remediate and respond to incidents. So finally, the last commandment I have is keep control of the incident. What I mean by that is you, as an incident responder or an incident handler, are handling the incident. And it means it's not the angry lawyer who's yelling at you. It's not the customer who's screaming at you. It's not your panicking colleagues. It's not your panicking IT department. You are handling the incident. That means that you need to be responsible for scheduling regular meetings if you're the incident handler and communicating with all the teams. And if you're the incident responder, you need to be responsible for keeping everything on track. It's very, very easy. We as technical people aren't always prepared with the managerial skills you need to do this. If you are having trouble getting people to stay on track, motivating people to work, getting organization done in incidents, take a management class. There's lots of stuff available at most large companies, or you can go to community college. There's lots of things available for you. There's lots of options. But you need to have those skills of getting people to do things in the proper order and follow the proper procedures and not miss any steps. And that is your job. And I've seen many, many incident responders who get into the middle of an incident and they get totally sidelined because they think that the person who's telling them to do things knows more than they do. And maybe they do, maybe they don't. But then you've got two people leading the incident at the same time. And there's total disorder then. So regardless of your technical skill at a particular task, when you have been assigned to be the incident responder in charge of an incident, you can ask for advice. You can go to your resources in various areas. But you need to make the final decision and convey it to the rest of your team about what's going to happen next in incident response. So finally, take pride in your work and responsibility for your mistakes. If you've done all of the things, you're going to make mistakes eventually. If you've done all the things that we've talked about here today, if you have good documentation and you have good connections, and you've done drilling tasks over and over again, and you know how to triage, you're going to end up okay if you make a mistake. You're going to have the resources you need to deal with it. However, you need to just learn from the mistakes that you make when you do make them, because you're going to deal with incidents ad infinitum. That's your job as an incident responder. It's not deal with something this week and take a break. You could be dealing with incidents in consecutive incidents for weeks on end. And you need to keep making those notes and keep documenting and keep your procedures up to date as you deal with them. So that's about all I have today. I don't know if anybody has anything to add story-wise about incident response, stories from the trenches. I do have my contact information up here if you are interested in anything that I talked about today, or if you like my slides, or if you want to discuss it more. I'll open up the floor if anybody has anything.
My friend had a call come in, and there's like, oh God, Venezuela is hacking us.
Yep.
They can't find out where it's coming. It keeps coming in. It's coming across multiple interfaces. it was coming across multiple. They were being hacked by from Venezuela, coming across multiple interfaces. Yeah, someone left the test environment plugged in.
Yeah, that absolutely does happen. Yeah. Um,
They actually went to the VP on that.
yeah, I've seen that over and over again. Go ahead. I'd prefer it if every workplace hired those two jobs separately, and if they were two entirely separate job roles. Now, realistically, in most large companies, with the way they're downsizing now and the way security budgeting works, you're not normally going to get two people hired, one to do incident response and one to do incident handling. But if you have 4 incident responders, you can kind of push one person into that incident handling role. Unfortunately, though, we don't see that happening a lot. Absolutely. Absolutely. I've seen more people burn out because of the bureaucracy. About number one, that's the first thing that I brought up, which was nobody gives a SSH about your exploit, where I talked about quantifying. That's what I see the most. I see very, very bright technical people who are just recent graduates from the best schools, and they get into things and they're shocked because they have these great ideas. And we as hackers, we kind of have a hacker mentality where we're creative, we want to do things our own way, we want to be unique. And when we go into these large organizations, especially government organizations, we kind of get beaten down. It's we have this way of doing things, and we've been doing it for 50 years this way, and why do you think you know better? So that's why I see the most young hackers and new hackers burn out, is because they get in there and they have these great ideas and they feel like they're getting crushed constantly. Measuring success as a human being or as an organization? As a human being, I think the best measure of success is not only your technical know-how, your certifications, but also you're dealing with human beings. That's usually half of the interviews that I do for people who want to become incident responders is your typing skills, your interfacing with human skills, your writing skills. So I'd measure that along with their technical skills, definitely. As an organization, that gets much more into the methodology. That gets more into metrics. See, the unfortunate thing is that people don't talk about how they're burning out. We're seeing it much more at conferences now. We've seen a lot of talks about burnout lately. At DEF CON, DerbyCon, we see this more and more and more. But the problem is we don't see these people who are actually feeling burned out coming to their management. And that's another kind of hacker mentality thing, being able to go into your boss's office and say, I'm burning out. I can't do this. I don't see that happening a lot. People are nervous about doing that. They don't know how to approach it. And we see people talking to their friends and talking to their local hacker groups about it instead. So you really would need to blind survey your people about those kinds of things. How are you dealing with stress, et cetera?
There's some companies do mentorship.
Yeah.
Where you have people working together on that.
Yeah.
Does that help the burnout process?
We do mentoring. We do mentoring. And it does to some extent because that mentor is giving them the business skills. They're giving them all these things that we just talked about. The ability to deal with organizations and deal with stress. There's a question back there. Yes, exactly. Yeah, but they're getting jaded faster now. We see people getting jaded much faster because of this. Oh no, yeah. Yep, yep. Sure. Document. Document everything. Document what you're doing 8 years before. When you're building the system, you document it then. You document your response processes then. If you can, you update them, but if not, if you don't have access, then what can you do? That documentation and that education is where you're tying that in. You want to have that ready for them. Yeah. Yep. Anything else? Oh, there's a question back there. Sir, come up here. I gotta check it. Checklists are fantastic. Absolutely. And depending on your industry, having that documentation becomes more and more important. Go ahead. We've got a couple minutes. Yeah. Yes. If you can build a lab and if you can do red team, blue team stuff in your environment, that's fantastic. And there's a lot of resources out there, labs pre-built to do kind of red team, blue team, forensics labs, challenges out there. I recommend you use those for your teams. There's actually a guy, Steve Morawski, he works at Stack Overflow, who does a great talk about, that's all he talks about. He was a police guy. He worked for a police department for years, and he brings in the police model of dealing with incidents and compares that to drilling, incident response tasks. You might want to look into his talk because he does specifically that. He just talks about drilling. Yes, yes, he is. Yes, highly recommend that if you want to talk about drilling more. But yeah, as far as drilling goes, what we do is we use labs and we do pre-built red team, blue team stuff, as well as doing like SANS forensics challenges, etc. I got time for like one more. Is there anybody else? Okay. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. We've never done anything without our team knowing. That's really dangerous. When you're dealing with, we have a lot of customers. When you're dealing with customers, you could end up informing the wrong person. That's dangerous. Yeah. If everybody in the chain knows about it, that's great. And we do it like internal phishing and stuff without informing people in advance. But as far as major like targeted incidents go, no, we haven't done that without knowledge for our team for those reasons. All right, well, thank you very much, guys.